Welcome to the show No Instructions, where we meet with founders and interview them about starting and growing their businesses. I'm your host, Chad Ingram, 3-time founder and CEO at Distro. Distro is a platform to help businesses build teams by breaking down borders around the world. Let's go ahead and get started with today's guest and see how they built their business. All right, welcome to the show No Instructions. Today we've got Chris Mann from Goal, co-founder, creative director. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah. So tell us where you're from.
You'll know immediately as soon as I start talking, right?
Yeah, exactly. We have to address this right away.
Yeah, I always feel like I have to preface it because if I don't, people are like thrown off immediately.
Yeah.
It's especially difficult with drive-thrus and stuff, but maybe that's for later in the conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from England, just south of London.
And how long have you been here?
I've been in the US for probably 18 years now.
Long time. So but you've kept your accent pretty steady, right? Like you haven't tried to curb it at all.
Yeah, no, I practice every day. You know? Yeah.
Some people like try to soften it a little bit or say things a different way, you know?
Yeah.
But
I feel like when I go back to England, people I feel like do notice that
it is changing.
There's a little something off about me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So it could be more intense.
Yeah. I think it's probably just like colloquialisms, right? Like slang and stuff like that comes out more when I'm back in England. And I think I probably dumb it down a little bit because you do get frustrated, right? Like, going through the drive-thru, there's only so many times that you can say the word water or some other word before you have to just say water, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So it does get annoying. Like it makes every interaction, you feel like they want to sort of ask you your life story or something because it's a novelty, right? Yeah. Hopefully it's not the only thing that makes me interesting.
No, there's
sometimes I feel like it is.
No, there's some cool stuff. I know we'll talk about it.
I always say you just get to know me for long enough and you'll find out I'm just a moron. It's the accent that makes me seem smarter than I am.
Well, you're very good at design, you know, and tell us before we jump into your story real quick, like tell us what Goal is and just kind of Twitter style real quick, and then we'll jump into your story.
Yeah. So Goal is a design and brand agency. We work oftentimes with, I guess, pretty technical businesses, right? Technology companies. And what we do best is to try and simplify their messaging, their positioning, their strategic foundation, and then build them a visual system so that they can scale and grow. So we've worked with a ton of tech startups, venture capitalists, finance companies, healthcare companies, deep technology companies. That's probably our bread and butter. Although my background has been pretty broad. I've done everything from consumer packaged goods, Johnson & Johnson, working with some of the biggest brands in the world, to technology startups. And
you've done some impressive stuff. Definitely companies people would recognize. So where does your story start? Obviously England.
Yeah. Obviously England.
But if somebody wants to get to know you, like, you know, where do you sort of begin?
In England.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I feel like I've always been involved in creative pursuits, right?
Okay.
I was one of these kids in school that I was not good at really academic subjects like English and math and, you know, the core sort of subjects. Things like art, I was always a lot more interested by. I took like a 2D design class when I was in high school or secondary school, as we might call it. So that's always been, I think, a foundation. I played music in a band growing up, right? And I think there's a natural sort of creative element to that.
Did you know that, like, were you aware enough when you were younger that you weren't good at some of these other things? Or was it just that you gravitated towards, like, were you self-aware enough at the time to be like, I really don't like math and I'm not good at it?
For sure, yeah, definitely. My grades showed that I wasn't good at some of these subjects. And, I think when I was tail end of high school, I thought I was going to become an architect. And it was the math that stopped me from doing that, because I realized, I think pretty quickly in exploring that, oh my goodness, buildings have to actually stand up. You know what I mean?
They don't have to just look cool.
They can't just have to look cool. So I moved quickly away from that. And it wasn't until I came to America, really, where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to get into. And studying advertising, marketing, graphic design at university led me to be like, okay, graphic design, I think
this could be interesting.
This could be
So
fun.
Back when you were younger, like, were you an only child, or did you have siblings?
No, yeah, 2 siblings. I have a brother. I'm the youngest of 3, older sister and an older brother.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And did you grow up in like a larger city in England, or did you grow up in smaller town?
Smaller town, yeah. I mean, everything in England is so close together. So we were, I guess, sort of, you might term it as part of London, right? It was like the sprawling mass. We were south of London, but everyone that lived in my town more or less probably worked in London, right? It was like a 40-minute...
Like a suburb almost.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, maybe. It's in West Sussex, but it was definitely a smaller town, right?
Yeah.
There's no industry there, you know what I mean? If you work in my town, you're probably working in like a thrift shop or a coffee shop or something like that.
Right. And what did your parents do for work then?
My dad was what we might call in England a boffin. He was just a nerd, you know what I mean? Like, he studied mathematics and economics in school, and worked in, business, let's say, right? He was in IT for a very long time. He did consulting for some years, working for the government with some contracts with like economic development and things like that. So he's done a range of stuff, but it's all within that sort of... My dad, I think, went through school and found out he was good at numbers and math and economics and stuff, and picked a very safe career, which I think everybody does, right? When of that generation, it's like... Yeah. So he worked the same job for, 12, 15 years.
And what about your mom?
My mum was a stay-at-home mum for the most part. And then later, as I was maybe 15, 16, she went back to school and became a therapist.
Oh, cool.
Counselor, yeah.
That's cool. So did you feel like, how does it differ here in the US versus where you grew up in the UK? Like this idea of working for someone else versus working for yourself or creating a company? Like, was that anything that was on your mind at the time, or did you ever see anything like that, or have friends or family or anybody who was, building or running a company? Or was it not as prevalent?
That's a great question. There are vast differences between mentalities in England and in the US. Most of my friends now, looking back, that are probably successful, honestly, in the trades or something, right? Like carpenter, electricians, bricklayers, whatever, and they own their own business and they're doing really well. But I mean, when I talk about some of the stuff that I've done in my career, I think a lot of my English friends are sort of a bit flabbergasted by the whole thing, because it's, I've raised money for a technology startup when I thought I was going to be a software entrepreneur, you know what I mean? This is my 3rd design agency that I've had. The first one sold, the second one went out of business, and bust due to an unfortunate partnership and stuff. And so, this sort of messy resume that I have, I think, and this, drive that maybe America gave me, right? I think part of that was coming over here. I think it's uniquely American. Yeah. There's this really funny comedian in England that talks about some of the differences between like entrepreneurship in both of these countries, and he, in his bit, go out and watch it. But in this bit, he's like, you go and say Elon Musk goes to his friends in like a bar or something, and he's like, I want to go to the moon, and everybody's like, yeah, man, you can do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's the American spirit.
Yeah.
And then if you were to say the same thing, if Elon Musk lived in England, right, and he went to his friends in a bar and he was like, I want to go to the moon, dude. I want to build like rockets and stuff, you know, they'd be like, don't be a dick, mate.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But it's funny, and, you know, I joke about it, but there is something to that mentality, you know. I think possibility, you know, having that sort of optimistic perspective.
Yeah.
I think there's something that's uniquely American about that. And we're not brought up in that way to believe those things or even think or assume that we could do some of those things.
Yeah, I was literally, so I made a post on LinkedIn yesterday that kind of took off. It went nuts. And then, and I think it was because I used a bad word on the first sentence, but
that'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah.
But somebody whose family is, I don't want to screw this up, but Korean. Yeah. And parents immigrated from Korea. And so I get that would make him like second generation, you know, or first generation here in the US. And he saw his parents kind of come here for opportunity and totally made their way, right? Dad started a small business. His mom started, you know, real estate business and, you know, as an agent and then investing in homes and stuff. And they've kind of created this really awesome life in a matter of, you know, 25, 30 years, you know? And which is a really short amount of time if you think about it, you know. And he was talking about like this duty that we have to keep that going, right? To keep this entrepreneur, you know, spirit alive because it exists here and almost only here. Yeah. And we kind of like, I certainly probably do maybe take it for granted because it's really normal for us, right? Like if somebody says, I want to start a business, everyone pats them on the back and says, go for it. Yeah. I mean, kind of. Some people still talk about it. You know,
but at least it's behind closed doors.
Yeah, exactly.
To your face, they're like, yeah, man, go for it.
And it's usually your family.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of wild. So you do see a difference of how it is here. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I was back in England right now, I would be, you know, working for somebody else, probably in London. It would be another design agency or some other big company, and I would be a cog in a machine, and you know, and probably not making very much money at all because designers don't get paid a lot over in England. But you know, it's easy when healthcare's free and stuff. It's easy to make ends meet, but
there are trade-offs.
Yeah, sure. There are trade-offs. But no, I don't think I would have done any you know, anything that I've done in America if it wasn't for being here and catching the bug. So
you're younger, you know, you got, you know, your parents, your dad's working a steady job. It seems like, you know, he's good at what he is. It sounds like the way you're describing him, are you different than him or pretty similar to him?
I mean, there was a stint where my dad had his own consulting business, where he, you know, trained people how to use spreadsheets and stuff, you know what I mean? He was like doing these training things. I think there's a lot that that we share a lot of similarities. I think a huge driver for me has been actually watching my dad, right? And I think I don't want to like throw my dad under the bus here. I think it's an older generation where they're getting to an age right now, and if they've worked for a company their whole life, they don't really have a retirement figured out. You know what I mean?
At least not comfortably.
No, they're not comfortable. They can get by, but being able to enjoy retirement, travel, enjoy the world, I think a lot of this older generation that have done that are somewhat restricted in a lot of ways. And so I have this, call it a chip on my shoulder or just this constant nagging little goblin that sits on my shoulder that's just like, you can't be that, or you can't get to that stage and be like that. Yeah. So there's this sort of constant nagging that's always present. That's, you know, I need to make more. I need to do more. That's hard sometimes as well.
Do you think that's something that you just kind of came to personally, or is that an American thing? Like, is that something that grew on you when you got here?
Yeah, I think I got I think coming to America, associating with the people that I've associated with, I think it's always been present in me growing up, right? It's why I came here maybe in the first place, because I wanted to experience something different. I wanted to be in a different place, live in a different place. But I think what America does is, if you're not entrepreneurial, right, you're not going to be entrepreneurial just because you're living in America. I think it emboldens you or enables you, right? Or just shows you a different way that you can work, right, and function in your career. So that's what it's done, right? I think it's always been present, but coming here, it's like giving me permission in some ways to like take risk or, you know.
A little bit of encouragement.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you come here? Like, what brought you here?
I came, so I went to BYU, which is like a university. I don't know how familiar your listeners are with Utah and stuff.
All over the country. So so BYU.
So it's like in Provo, right? So if you're familiar with Salt Lake, it's south of Salt Lake. So I went to BYU. My dad went to BYU.
Interesting.
My brother went to BYU. And my dad was one of these like pioneers, right? When he was like applying and going to BYU, he was like sending letters back and forth between the school trying to get in, you know?
Which was, a big deal, you know?
Big deal, yeah.
You know, so for context, for some, BYU is a religious-based school, right? An LDS, a Mormon school. Yeah. And there's a lot of people, it's actually very competitive to get in.
Really,
in general, right? Because everyone who is Mormon applies there, and, you know, and if they're smart enough to get into Harvard, Stanford, or any of these other elite schools, BYU is very cheap for them. And so they'll oftentimes choose BYU.
100%, yeah. And they have great programs, right?
Yeah, great programs.
The design school that I went to is probably, you know, one of the best in the country, or at least it was when I was going to school. And so,
the accounting program is, you know, the leading program in the country. Yeah. You know? So it's a great school. So your dad went.
Dad went there, yeah. And so I think growing up, seeing him, hearing stories about, you know, him driving this like big Buick Skylark, you know what I mean?
Which my brother owns a Buick Skylark.
Yeah, which is like
really cool.
Which is like a boat compared to English cars, you know what I mean? Like
huge. In fact, my brother, he's in Southern California, and he found one for sale here, fully restored, beautiful car. Yeah. Up here in Utah. And he's like, "Can you go buy that for me?" And so, but he wasn't able to come up for like a month. So he sends me the money. I go buy him this Buick Skylark. Yeah. I go pick it up in Salt Lake off this lot. And I drove that thing around for a couple weeks, and it was so cool. Yeah. Like, it was literally a boat on wheels. Yeah. Huge.
Yeah. And, you know, hearing these stories and others of my dad, like drinking root beer and sort of living an American life, I think it indoctrinated me a little bit to like I always sort of liked America, right? Growing up, and again, because
you were interested.
I was interested in it, and so I applied to get in, and so that's what brought me over initially was coming to school over here, BYU.
Okay, so you go to BYU. Does school in college become a little easier to you, or do you feel like you have to work really hard to get good grades?
No, I mean I hate to be down on America, but school is actually. My sort of last couple of years of high school was much, much more difficult than any college class that I ever took. I think there's a rigor in like English colleges and I guess universities that you might get in places, but I don't know. I didn't really feel that. I feel like it
wasn't too bad.
Like I don't think I ever got a B ever in any of my high school classes. And then I came over and I was starting to get Bs in BYU and I was like, oh, crazy. This is cool. I think it's just a way that the English, like to get a C, right? It's like, it's a good grade. And again, it's just a way that they sort of oppress you in England, right? To keep you humble and to keep you like just down.
You're not that smart.
You're not that smart, you know what I mean? To get an A, you've got to be like a freak of nature.
Wow.
And it's a lot easier to get and stuff. So yeah, it was like, I felt like it was simple. It doesn't mean that I didn't still struggle at like academics. I just felt better while I was struggling because I was getting like B's and stuff. You know what I mean?
What was the most shocking thing? Do you remember? Like the most culture shocking thing when you moved here to go to school?
Coming to school, what was the most shocking thing? That's going back now. I think probably just like the size of everything. You know what I mean? Like even just like
What do you mean by that?
Well, just like the size of the roads, just the distances that you travel. You know what I mean? Like I'm used to it now, but me traveling to Vegas, it's not unusual, right?
Yeah,
or like St. George or whatever. Yeah. It's like you make that trip 4 or 5 hours. It's not a huge deal. Going 4 or 5 hours in England and you're like, not even in England, you're like in France now, you know what I mean? And so when you're traveling those distances, it's like, you know, I was recently back in England and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go visit this place. And they're like, it's like an hour and a half drive to get there. And I was like, okay, simple, you know, easy. It's like, how many days are you going there for? I'm like, I don't know, just like the afternoon. It's like an hour and a half. It's just down the street. So I think the scale, right, is
it's funny how
was most shocking.
It reminds me of something. So I'm from Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles, you literally live in your car, right?
Yeah.
You drive all the time. That's why the car culture is so big, you know, in LA, because you live in your car. You know, you're everywhere you go. So, you know, we've been here in Utah now, like 9 years or something. And so I'm much more Utah now than I am, you know, from California. And, you know, here it's kind of like you can get most places within about 30 minutes, you know, most places probably 20 minutes that you want to go to. You know, if you live kind of here in Utah County, heading north, south, you can kind of get to everywhere in about that time. Yeah. So then we go to California and they're like, oh, you know, we're going from this city to, you know, this other city. And it's just, you know, it's massive, right? You can drive from Ventura County all the way down to the San Diego area, all the way to the border of Tijuana, Mexico, and drive for 4 hours and see homes in the city the entire way. It's like massive. Yeah. And, you know, we go down there and there'll be, you know, family will be like, hey, we're going to go to this place for dinner. It's about an hour and 30-minute drive. And we're like, holy crap. And they're like, that's normal. You know? Like, on the daily, you know, you do that all the time.
And you get used to it, right?
Yeah. You're just used to it. So that's interesting, the scale, especially out here in the West, though, you know, what you're describing, you know, it just, there's so much land still out here. It's crazy. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. It really is insane. I think back in the day, it's changed a lot now. Like it's quite affordable me taking my American money and going back to England, but back in the day coming here, it was like food was so cheap and
was it
clothes were cheap and everything was just like, I felt, you know, because the pound was a lot more powerful back then. And so just like, you know, but it's not that case anymore. But that's another noticeable thing. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm getting like a Subway sandwich for $5. You know, it's like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Yeah. Especially as like a poor college student.
Right. Okay. So after school, or like, what do you do next? You know, you're at school, like what happens next?
Yeah. I mean, I always thought, again, like I said, BYU has actually a phenomenal design program, and they're at least when I was in school, they were sort of a feeder for really New York, right? So if you were a top student, you were sort of destined to work for some design agency in New York City. Right. I did my internship in New York at Johnson & Johnson. So I was working on, you know, only the sexiest brands like Rogaine and Listerine. And,
they're really fun stuff.
Yeah, really fun stuff, but huge brands, right? I mean, globally recognized mega brands with huge design teams. So I did my internship there in New York City. We lived in Lower East Side. You know, I was married at the time, one kid. I think, you know, it was such a small apartment. I think our kid was like stuck in a closet somewhere.
Married in school.
Married in school, yeah. So I did that and had that experience in New York City and thought about, you know, extending that, or when I graduated going there and working there, because some of my favorite design agencies were there. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was sort of a dream to even interview at some of these places.
Did it also feel a little smaller for you?
Yeah.
Like bigger and smaller.
Yeah, no, it felt a little bit more like home, right? For sure, exactly. Other than the massive cat-sized rats that were running all over the place.
Okay, so I went on a trip with my co-founder Andrew last year to New York, and I hadn't been actually since the pandemic. I used to travel a ton, and then we didn't.
Yeah.
And so, we were taking Ubers a lot around. He hadn't been to New York, and I was like, "Oh, dude, we got to go on the subway." And he's like, "What? Why?" And I was like, "It's an experience, bro." And he's like, "Okay, let's do it." And I was like, "All right." We're literally going to look down, at the railing of the platform, like the rails, and you're going to see like rats crawling. Yeah. And he's like, just like at any point, I was like, yes, like right now. Yeah. And so we go down there and you could just see, like, it's amazing.
No, it's crazy. Yeah.
Like you literally just minding your own business and there's like a rodent running by you.
Yeah. Our apartment was right on this, like, it was on the street called Forsyth, and there were basically soccer fields next to it. So I commuted from Lower East Side to Chelsea, which is where the global strategic design office was for Johnson & Johnson. Really beautiful space, right next to like Martha Stewart's spot and all these other celebrities and stuff. Really cool. But as I was commuting back, I would walk through this park, and it was sort of later in the evening, so it was kind of getting dark.
Yeah.
And the first time, there was just these shadows running all in front of, like over my feet and like all over the park. And I was just, oh my goodness, this is crazy.
That is crazy. Not the America we always want to talk
about.
Yeah,
no. But New York City, I despite the rats, right?
Yeah. So
it was one of the best cities in the world, guaranteed.
For sure.
It's amazing.
And really good pizza, really good food.
Yeah.
Really good food. So go back to, you get married. So where's your wife from?
She's from Vegas.
What's her name?
Kate Mann.
Kate Mann.
Kate Jensen, I guess it was.
Well, yeah, before, right? Before, so you meet her at BYU?
Mm-hmm.
And so she's from Vegas, which is like 5-hour drive from, here, this area where BYU is. And so what does that mean? That means, hey, I'm not going back to England, or maybe we do, or like that's a big decision, right? To get married, to an American here, right?
Yeah, it was. I guess I didn't really think about it too much, right? My wife, Kate, is actually really, really open-minded and wanted to leave, right? I think she still resents me to this day for like not moving outside of the US for a while.
Right.
But you know how it goes, like career gets in the way and you just kind of get busy and your network gets built and you just kind of stay where you are. So yeah, I think she's still craving some time outside of the US, but
so she would have done that.
She would have moved. Yeah.
That's cool.
If I would have said, hey, we're going back to England or Australia, we had family there, she would have been like, yeah, let's do it.
So you didn't feel like it was so much pressure that, hey, if I marry this woman here, like I am stuck here forever.
Yeah.
That's cool. It's a good partnership.
Yeah, that's good.
So how many kids do you have today?
4.
4 children. Mm-hmm. How old are they?
Our oldest and only girl is 14, and then we have 3 boys, 10, 7, and 4.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's a good crew.
So, okay, after New York, what do you do next?
Yeah, so that's where I did my internship, right? I think I kind of learned that New York's a really hard place to live and raise kids, especially, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, what's the opposite of New York? Bay Area, right? It's like the opposite side of the country. California's a little more spread out.
Yeah.
So when I graduated, I got a job at this place called Office. It's impossible to Google.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. It was a design agency. We work with clients like Facebook and Google and Apple and, all of the massive tech companies, but it was such a cool little design agency in the Mission. We lived on the East Bay, and I kind of commuted in each day.
Cool.
And that was that was my first real job outside of an internship and school. I was like, okay, yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
This is fun. Yeah, all 11 months of it.
Okay, so it wasn't that long. So what happened?
I mean, it's tough, right? It was a small little design shop.
Yeah.
A small team, husband and wife ran. Really did awesome work, but it's tough environment, right? Long hours and busy schedules, and it was tough to be there. I probably would have stayed there a lot longer, but a friend that we sort of had been freelancing and doing contract work with back in Utah, he was like, hey, do you want to start a design agency? And I was like, hang on a minute, this is is not what I imagined in school. Like I'm 11 months out, you know what I mean, of school. And I'm like, it seems a bit too soon. But after talking about it and thinking about it, I mean, I was coming home from that job and I was working, doing contract work with this buddy of mine.
Yeah.
Long until the night. And I was just like, okay, let's see if we can make this work. So I moved back to Utah at that point, and that's when I started my first design agency.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how did it go?
Awesome. Yeah, we had a small little team. We were in like 100 square foot office that was like, rented from a friend of ours.
Right.
We had 2 other employees, and yeah, we were living the dream, right?
That's awesome.
Super scrappy, and we had good, consistent amount of work. We had one big client, I guess, kind of paid all the bills and fed everybody.
Were you like, were you scared at all in doing that?
Oh yeah, I was petrified.
Yeah.
Coming back again, I was like, I think it was fighting that English mentality a little bit, right?
Right.
I was like, this is not how careers go. You know, I've got to like stay at a place for like 15 years before I can go out and start my own design agency and do my own thing.
You need more experience.
Yeah, I need more experience. And I was just like, after 11 months. And so it felt bizarre. And I have conversation with people today and they're like, how do you start your own thing, as they're trying to think about starting their own thing. And I don't know, I guess I was naive enough to just do it,
Yeah, it's funny you say that. It reminds me of a story. I was co-founder in my first company. I had actually started with my cousin who had more experience than me. He had a successful business prior to this. And we're running this business. We've got like, I don't know, 25 employees at the time or something, maybe 20. And there was a sales manager that was trying to copy our offering and trying to copy our product, and he quit and wanted to go compete against us. And we had already had a bunch of momentum, right? We like kind of figured this out. We figured out how to sell, do this thing. And I remember saying, he's a joke. I'm telling my business partner, this guy's a joke. Don't even worry about it. He's not going to be successful.
Yeah.
And then he responds with, he doesn't know that. And I'm like, oh, sometimes there's like a lot of competitive advantage to not knowing.
Yeah.
Now with what you might not even be willing to do it.
I would be one of these designers that I talk to all the time, right? That are trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I think going into it, I mean, it wasn't completely risk, right?
Right.
I would never recommend starting a business by just like, okay, and now we're open. Yeah, and then you just kind of wait by the phone, It's like, I had work, we were doing work. It was still a risk, but it was like de-risked because we had work coming in and money coming in, you know what I mean? Yeah. I just did it.
And how did your wife feel at the time about it?
I mean, she was petrified. I also,
Poor Kate.
Yeah, she was. She seriously was. But she's incredible, right? She's such an supportive, amazing person.
You could be scared and supportive.
Yeah, you can. You can.
Totally.
Yeah. So she, right at that time as well, it didn't help that I heard back, because I had interviewed a year previous or 11 months previous when I was leaving school at this design agency called Pentagram with the incredible Michael Beirut, who is like globally recognized creative director, designer, leads one of the leading design agencies in the world. Wow. He emailed me right at this time, as I had already committed to come back to Utah and start this design agency. And he was like, do you want to come in and interview again? Because I think we might have a spot for you. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is like if I would have described what my career would be, it would be going to work for this guy. Right. And so I had this decision now. I was like, okay, do I go out to New York? I've just committed to my business partner now to go back to Utah, or do I go here? And I was just like, thank you so much, Michael. This is, I really appreciate it. I'm grateful that you even remembered me from like a year previous. But I've already committed to go and start this business in Utah. So that made it even more painful, right? Because I was like, oh my goodness, am I making a huge mistake here?
Yeah.
So it was a nightmare.
Yeah, but like, once you've tasted what it's like, because I mean, you by nature are a creative person, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are creative people in general.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the sense of designing, but
yeah.
they like to solve problems.
Definitely.
And once you've felt that freedom to create and that freedom to solve problems, it's really hard to go back.
Yeah.
It's possible, but it's hard to go back.
Yeah, no, I mean, 10 years later, right? I don't really have a resume to point to. It's like, if I ever tried to go and apply for some real job now, they'd be like, sorry, what have you been doing the last 10 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny when people ask me what I do for work who don't know me. I was like, I don't know how to tell you what I do. I know. It's always kind of hard.
I create stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really awesome. So you've definitely built an awesome career doing that. Built a name for yourself, and people want to come to you to get help with their brand. So are we like, what are you doing today? What's keeping you occupied today?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I mean, I think I briefly mentioned, I've done a lot of different things, right? I think the most consistent thread is I'm a graphic designer, whether that's for product or whether that's packaging, whether that's branding, it's kind of all the same to me. But I've always done that. But there's been these moments in my career where I've started businesses, right? That are like, okay, I need to exercise this. After my second design agency sort of went under, right?
Yeah.
We had to let go of, like 11 people in one day.
Wow.
It was, I was at this sort of crossroads where I was like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, we consult these clients. We work with some of the most talented, incredible founders and entrepreneurs, that I've ever met. I was like, I'm going to be a tech entrepreneur. So I raised $500,000 from like friends, basically, and started this software business.
When was this? Roughly what year?
This would have been around 2017, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, right around there somewhere.
Yeah.
A couple of years before the pandemic.
Yeah. And so what happened? You raised some capital.
Yeah, that was scary, right? It was the first time that I'd like taken a significant amount of money from somebody else, and it's always scary doing that from somebody else. And $500,000 is not a huge amount, but it's also not a small amount, right? Sure. To be like, okay, give me this, and let's see if we can do this. And there, there was, split between like services that they provided and cash, and so it was like a hybrid. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the particulars, but the point is that it felt a lot, right? It felt significant, and so I started this software business. Probably 12 months later, it was already shut down and gone, and I'd moved on. Which, in hindsight, I think was actually the best way to fail at that business. It was an unproven product. Nothing like that had been done before. There were sort of adjacent businesses that were sort of similar to it, but it was a lot. And we were at this point, 12 months later, where we had to raise more. I'd made every single mistake. The cap table was a mess. There were way too many people involved. And so every mistake that a founder makes, I probably made in how I set up and organized that business.
Yeah.
But I failed quickly. And I think the only redeeming quality of that experience was like, I knew that I needed to get out because it was such a mess, and I had incredible people advise me that, it was probably the best thing to do. Diogo Album, VC, was someone that a meeting that I remember having, and
him mentor.
Yeah, him basically saying, you need to clear up this cap table if anybody's going to get involved in the future. And so it was difficult, and it was such an amazing learning experience. I'm just grateful. You hear founders struggling like that for a decade plus, and I was in and out in 12 months and learned what I needed to learn. My favorite
are the founders that are going to market for 5 years.
Yeah.
And still raising money.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a really rewarding and fun experience. On the tail end of that, I started what is now Goal. Right? with a friend of mine.
Which has been, you've been running Gold now for over 5 years or something?
Yeah,
like that?
5 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fantastic experience, and I think you are right. You know, the fact that you're able to move on from that quickly too. I had several conversations with a founder who was struggling to raise additional capital, had raised when the getting was good in like 2021.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it raised like 1.5 million or so.
Yeah.
And then it took too long to go to market, lost momentum, and tried to keep that thing going by himself and a few fragmented like contractors for a year.
Yeah.
And I finally told him, you need to shut it down.
Yeah.
It's just my opinion. I'm sure it's without context.
I mean, I would say
from the outside in, you should shut it down.
Yeah. More often than not, that's probably the best advice.
For sure.
Right. With a lot of these businesses and startups and stuff.
Yeah. And I was actually talking to a VC here in town, and a very early stage VC. There's only a couple, so somebody might know who this is, but you know, and we were talking about like, you know, some of these startups he invested in, and you know, earlier stage, higher risk, right? And so more of these very early stage companies are just going to go out of business. Yeah. And so he was talking about, you know, the founders would be so scared to call him and say, we lost the money and we're going out of business.
Yeah.
And his perspective was, I was relieved when they would call me and tell me that they were going out of business, right? I didn't have to keep having difficult calls with them and bad updates. And he's like, we know many will go out of business, you know? Yeah. It's just, I think, you know, you try to grasp and hold on because you don't want to face the actual thing, which is it's done. Yeah.
And you are, right? I was so driven, and it was such an intense period of like building and growth and testing and validation. And again, it was a significant amount of money to me. And I really was grateful to those individuals that gave me money for this business. And at the end, when I was like, I was so stressed out when I knew, right, deep in my heart that I was like, okay, this is not a viable thing any longer. I went to one of these guys and I was like, you know, head in between my legs. I was just like, I'm so sorry. And he was like, okay, cool. Yeah. Such a cool, like, it happens, right? I think when you invest and when you have experience doing that, you know, it just doesn't work out sometimes.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Most of the time.
Yeah, very often, you know. But Americans, maybe we're stupid. So we just keep saying, go for it again.
Yeah. So I after that, actually, that software business, I started an essential oils business.
Did you really?
And was selling essential oils. I generally did, yeah. I was like, okay, software technology is really hard. You know what I mean? Especially if it's unproven and untested and there's not really anyone to copy. So I was like, okay, let's do a direct-to-consumer essential oils brand. And I sold out of that one to my other two partners. And, got it. Awesome experience, right? We built it to 20, 30 grand a month in revenue, and then we got out, but it was...
That's validating.
Yeah.
And a heck of a brand, I bet. Right?
Yeah, it was cool. It's still around today. You should go check it out.
That's
awesome. Awesome little business, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you do that for a little while, and then you start Goal.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And Goal's, you know, going today, and you're spending your time doing that. What do you do like outside of work? You know, what do you enjoy doing when you're not working? Yeah,
I mean, there's always tons of ideas flowing, right? Right now, on top of what I'm doing with Goal, I'm starting a little business called Sunday Drive Club, which is like a little driving community. We're going to build a little app for it, and it'll, you know, essentially be a way to document your garage, cars you have, and also document drives. So if you're familiar with like all trails or something, right? Yeah. It's like that, but for cars. So you can go and take other people's drives that they've taken and document that and post about it and stuff. So
that's really cool.
Just a you know, I say for funsies, it's just like a fun side project.
You're a car guy.
Yeah, car guy.
Yeah, definitely a car guy.
Yeah.
What kind of cars do you like?
What
kind of cars are you most interested in?
Most interested in? I mean, there's so many. It's such a hard question. There's, I think I'm kind of a sucker for some of the classics. Not classic, not like vintage, but Porsche 911, 993. You know,
Beautiful car.
that model was sort of the strip lighting at the back, the wider back end. You know, it's got a really fat butt to it, and you still got the circular. It's just such a beautiful 9911
love that car
model. So 993 I think is amazing. Alpha 4C I think would be an incredible little sports if you can keep an Alpha on the road, but it would be an incredible little sports car to get, and then not even that expensive.
That's cool.
I grew up watching motorsports, so F1, and really was into rally as well. So
rally's huge so I rally race.
Yeah, you do.
Not intensely, but it's kind of like my secondary driving experience. But rally is cool. And
best drivers in the world.
Honestly.
Yeah.
You know, if there were more money in rally, they say this in America also about off-road. So you'll have NASCAR drivers or some very, very popular or experienced like road drivers will come and try off-road. Yeah. And they'll always say, this is way more fun. Yeah. It's a shame there's not more money in this. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Like F1, obviously. Yeah. But rally in Europe is, I mean,
huge. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. These guys are crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the Finns, right? Finnish drivers, they produce some of the best rally drivers in the world. And
absolutely.
I think, there's just...
you could own kind of a car.
I mean, that's why I bought it. Yeah.
That's why you drive a car that was really a road version of a rally car.
Yeah. If I could have bought, so the GR Yaris, right? Yeah. The Toyota GR Yaris you can actually buy that in England. Mm-hmm. It's like a little, the Yaris is what they use when they're rallying. I couldn't get that here, so I got the closest thing, which is the GR Corolla. So it was it's a slightly larger Yaris.
Well, it's kind of funny as you look at, for people that don't know cars, you think like, all right, Chris is a car guy driving a Corolla.
Yeah, I know.
But this car is not a Corolla. This car is like
it's awesome.
An extremely special, fast car built like, it might look like, to somebody who doesn't know, it might look like just any old car, but it's a very special car. Yeah. Very, very well built.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 300 horsepower all-wheel drive rally car, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It's like so much fun, right? I think when it starts to snow here, it's like the funnest car in the world to take in the snow and, do all sorts of stuff with. So
yeah.
No, I actually like that. It's not like an obnoxious car. It's, most people would just say, oh yeah, you drive a Corolla. And I'm like, yeah, I drive a Corolla.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they don't really know.
But if you are a car guy, you're like, oh, dang.
That is a special car.
It's a GR Corolla, yeah.
Yeah, so rally. So you like rally, and you follow F1. We've actually been, and I think
you were going to come.
Yeah.
You were going to come to Vegas.
Attended the Vegas. I was going to come.
You were going to come.
I wasn't able to come.
No, you weren't going to.
We have watched. I think a F1 race together. Before. Yeah. F1's really cool. Do you follow it pretty closely?
Yeah, I do. Try to watch every race, and
it's awesome.
Get to know.
It's cool. I should probably watch it more often. But I mean, I can watch rally racing, anything on dirt, something with a cage and a tube chassis or something. I could watch that for hours. If
you're a car guy, if you watch rally, right? Because F1's like, there's the story and the prestige of like, Monaco and Monza and these different races. It's like a whole experience when you watch it. Rally's it's just days. It's just a few days of people that know how to work on cars, driving cars.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like you don't have a pit crew to change your tire if you hit a tree or hit some stump or something like that. You're getting out of the car as the driver and doing your best to like duct tape the hood shut or whatever. You know what I mean?
Literally. Like even like big, huge professional drivers, you'll see like a thrown together like zip tied panel on or something. Yeah. It's funny. I actually was out driving and practicing. So last night I had a testing session. So we test our cars before every race. Yeah. And so we have a race next Saturday actually.
Cool.
And not far from here actually. And but the week prior I was driving in southern Utah off-road and I had just called out over the radio to watch because it had rained the day before and the roads are still pretty slick. And we were on this very rally type it wasn't like a trail. It was like a very rally type road through the trees. And I totally went off and took out a evergreen pine tree, like hammered it.
Yeah.
And, anyway, get out, laugh, everything's fine. Try to patch it together and keep going.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's so, I mean, that's why I think, it doesn't have the prestige or the viewership as F1 because it's for car guys, you know what I mean?
And it's hard. It's also harder. Those types of things, like you're talking a car that's moving kilometers or miles, long distances very fast from point to point. And it's just harder to spectate it.
Yeah.
Right. It's harder to record it. Whereas like F1 within a few square miles, you can kind of record most of it hitting the same place. And so it just by nature makes it harder to spectate.
It is. Yeah.
And so I think that makes it harder to advertise and to sell it and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when you go to a rally race, one thing that's cool and very similar to off-road desert racing, you go to a rally race and depending on the race, but for the most part, like the races I've done, you literally have people lined standing right on the side of the race course the whole freaking way.
Yeah.
And it's wild, and people are like cheering for you, like right there. And you're a driver, and you see their faces. You're going by 80 miles an hour or something.
It's terrifying.
It's super terrifying, right? And it's like it's more visceral though.
Yeah,
there's like people there, and they're like cheering you on.
Yeah, and if you end up on your side or whatever, they're coming over and like
for sure
pushing you back on the road.
And driving. And I don't race in Mexico. I race in the U.S. And U.S. it's a little less savage, I guess. They do close down the desert and stuff, and they're spectating areas. Yeah. But like in Mexico, it's a free for all. So you literally have people lined the course.
Yeah. Seeing if they can like feel the wind of the car as it drives by.
They literally do that. You can look on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. They'll stand on the course recording, and then they'll kind of part ways as the trucks come through going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, no, it's insane.
So it's a little risky, but kind of fun thing. But F1's a little bit different. So it was funny when first time I met you, we pull up. It's really ironic. We pull up and you go, all right, I'm going to get in my car. And you get into your Mini. And I was like, of course the British guy
of course.
is driving a Mini.
So stereotypical.
I know. So
it was a cool Mini though.
It was a very cool Mini.
It was a John Cooper work. So it was like top spec, little Mini Cooper.
Yeah, it was so cool.
It was a really fun car to drive as well. Yeah.
It's a super cool car. Kind of a rally-ish tiny car as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they were used, right? Those little Coopers were used for rally.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, there's some of my like, again, in the U.S., American Rally Association is much smaller than rallying. But here we have like Travis Pastrana and Ken Block, who passed away, but and some other drivers that Simonek, like insanely fast drivers, and it is. It's inspired me to like get into that a little bit more because I feel like, it'd make me a better driver, participating.
Yeah.
So maybe we could get you to enter your Toyota in a race. Yeah.
That would be fun. Yeah. That would actually be really fun.
It would be really fun. I need a little work after.
Yeah, definitely. No, cars has always been a big part of growing up and everything, right? I guess we've talked about it at the end, but it's been a big part of my life. And on top of Sunday Drive Club, I'm also co-host on Ethan Parker's new show, Stick Shift.
Yeah, I didn't know if we were allowed to ask you about that or not. So
you can. I'll bring it up.
Yeah, I guess this episode won't come out for a few weeks anyway, but tell us about Stick Shift a little bit.
Yeah, Stick Shift is, I met Ethan maybe a year ago and we hit it off. We had let's call it a first date, right? It literally was. We went to Top Golf and then he was like, do you want to come watch a movie after? And so it was like, only ones in the movie theater. Me and Ethan sat.
Was it Gran Turismo?
It was Gran Turismo.
That was such a good movie.
It was a good movie.
And I'm a huge Nissan GTR fan.
Yeah, it was such a cool movie. It has sort of Fast and Furious vibes, right?
It does.
Like it's like cheesy but in the best possible way.
But in subtle ways, it's for car people.
It's for car people, yeah. So it felt weird. It felt, two dudes in a movie theater. It was like, coming out of it, I was like, you kind of feel dirty. You know what I mean?
Hands?
Like, what did we do? We really enjoyed that movie. And it was like, So two guys in a movie theater. So we met back then. Ever since we've, just been talking cars and then we included our other friend, Brent.
Brent Thompson, who's also on this podcast.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we were like, hey, let's see if we can do this. Ethan is a natural born entrepreneur. Like, he just makes stuff happen. And so this is kind of his brainchild, and we're just supporting from the sidelines, it feels like sometimes. But yeah, it's cool. It's really fun. So far, I don't know if it's going to be huge, massive. If Ethan's involved, probably will be. But right now, it's just a ton of fun talking about cars and making fun of each other. It
is cool. Like I've seen a couple of the filming days that I attended, and I'm really excited to see just the episodes, right? Like, I've seen it from a different perspective, but it'll be cool to see what post production and editing is like.
Yeah.
So you're a host on that show as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, it's good to have you on the show and learn from your experience. Definitely for everyone listening, look out for Stick Shift as a episode, to be able to watch on YouTube or wherever you want to watch it, on the website as well, I'm sure. But if people want to reach you, how do they reach you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Honestly, probably follow me on LinkedIn or something. Okay. I'm fairly active there, and get in touch. It's love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of No Instructions. Feel free to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe so we can continue producing these podcasts. Today's episode was brought to you by Distro. Distro is a platform to help startups find, hire, and pay employees in over 200 countries. It's free to use. Go to distro.io to set up your free account today.